Hello, and welcome to Talk of the Town. I'm Michael Jacobi, your host. Delighted to have you join us as this experiment continues. We've been doing this, I guess, about 6 or 7 weeks, and delighted to have the quality and interest of the guests we've had up until now, and they have been compelling to say the least, and today is all the more true. A young lady named Kelly Estes. Hello, Kelly.
Hi.
How are you? You're way over there, so I can't shake
I'm way
your
over
hand.
across the table.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's good to see you. You were on my radio show a few weeks ago or a month ago, and you've written a book called The Cost of Courage. I will hold this up.
Of course.
It's like, I'd like to buy a vowel.
Like Vanna White over here.
Which is a terrific book, and we're going to talk about it in just a second. But you, my dear, are quite the overachiever.
Yeah.
And as you said on the first time we chatted, you were 18 and you had some time off and you decided to write a book.
Downtime, yep. That's what I did with my downtime.
And as I said, my downtime was chicken wings. So it's a different approach. Tell me a little bit about your background.
Okay, so basically I started with the county with a volunteer capacity with the county when I was 14 years old. I was in the youth task force and turned that into a human relations commission gig for about 5 years. And in that capacity, I was able to start helping our local veterans with a task force that I created with the district attorney and some other local resources. And from there, I actually wrote a book, and I wrote a book about my uncle's experiences in war, in World War II. And from there, I've developed a nonprofit organization, and I know we'll talk a little bit about that today.
Sure, absolutely.
But that's just some of my background, and it's brought me to where we are today.
You went to Santa Clara.
Yes.
Santa Clara. You went to MIDI,
Went
and
to
then
MIDI for high
University of
school.
Santa Clara.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, our friend who's on our board, Joe Brzezinski, was over at MIDI, I think, when you were there. You knew the name, maybe a little bit before you.
Yeah, I know the name, and I was there between 04 and 08.
Yeah,
So I graduated in 08. So
You're so young.
thank you. Thank
Black belt, it's an
Taekwondo.
observation.
I appreciate that.
Black belt Taekwondo.
Yeah, yep. So I started
Hi.
Taekwondo when I was 6, and but I think this was a foundation though for why I've been able to start something, and we were talking about earlier, stick with it until it's finished. So I started when I was 6. I was told by doctors because I had really bad asthma I wouldn't make it. I should just stop because it could cause health problems, but I just kept going, got my black belt, taught for a while.
Okay.
And I think that really gave me a foundation for everything I'm doing in life.
You and I have something in common that will explain the rest of the interview.
Okay.
Is that we both have ADD.
Yeah, I think
So,
we do.
We're going to have a contest to
Gonna
see who
be fun.
changes the subject the most.
We'll see. We'll see.
The idea of working with veterans, not only because of your family relationship with it, but I know it's important to you to give back because you've had a lot of blessings throughout your life.
Very much so.
And you and I are kind of on the same page with veterans that why is it there has to be so much private funding? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if the government can afford to send you to war, they can afford to take care of you. Unfortunately, that's not the situation.
Not always.
Not always. So talk a bit specifically about the book. It's fiction, but it's steeped in fact.
Yeah. So when I was at MIDI, I actually was able to do a history project focused on my uncle who was killed in action during the Doolittle raid. So from that class.
Now, is this something you knew? I mean, was this part of the family lore growing up, or
not really? I mean, nobody really talked about it because I think it was so long ago because it had occurred in the 40s, and I think that over time it's just it's not that it's forgotten, it's just not the main topic of conversation. So I was able to look into that history and really understand a little bit more about his life, about his service, and what happened when he was killed. And there was a whole other aspect of the story that his brother had struggled with for his entire life because he found out his brother was killed when he was in a prison camp. So there was that whole aspect. I had no idea when I was delving into this as part of just a history class that it would have so many layers to it. And it really taught me a lot getting to know my uncle who had survived.
Now, your uncle was still alive.
Well, one was killed in action and his
yeah.
brother had actually survived. So in talking with him, I learned a lot about what people struggle with PTSD and just, a lot of survivor's guilt, a lot of issues that people have that make it through war. So I feel like at 15, I learned a lot about that, and I knew that I had to help preserve this story. And that was a concern of my uncle, that if something happened to him, nobody would be there to preserve the story. So I felt a great deal of responsibility. I didn't even know what I bit off when I, started this project. But from there, it evolved into a documentary and into the book, and now into the nonprofit organization, and my desire to help other vets aside from, my uncle and the one in my own family. So.
Well, what's interesting, and particularly for my generation, if you would believe that the trauma started in Vietnam, where the fact is there were a tremendous number of cases coming out of World War II. I'm sure coming out of World War I as well.
I'm sure,
that really weren't recognized.
They didn't know a lot about it back then, so it's grown a lot in research.
Now, is your uncle still alive?
No.
Okay.
No.
Did you find, excuse me, in talking to him, because a lot of us, I'm sorry, who talk with either our parents or grandparents about their experiences, it's difficult to get people to come out.
Yeah.
Did you have trouble getting him to talk a lot about it?
I was, honestly, I didn't know what to expect when I first talked to him about this subject. I thought he was going to hang up the phone, get mad at me, or, just any spectrum of emotions. I could only imagine what it was going to be. So I just called him, and, he loves that my name's Kelly, because he's Irish. So he thought that, that's very Irish, and he thought that was really great. So, we connected with that, and we just started talking. I talked about, his brother and just sort of the bare facts, and then it got more emotional as the initial conversation went on. And I think he started to see that I just wanted to preserve this story, because I felt like this needed to be told. And he was so worried that his brother was going to get forgotten, because like I said, if something happened to him, his brother was buried for nearly 60 years. Nobody went to visit.
Now, he became aware of his brother's death while in prison?
While he was in prison camp. So they were serving, one was in the European theater, one was in the Pacific. So neither really knew what was going on with the other, but he found out that his brother had been killed while he was in prison. So it was this whole thing, and I just don't think he was the same after that happened.
So how long, so he was in a Nazi prison camp, and how long had he been in the service before he was captured?
I believe almost a year.
So he saw combat
and
also the other side
he
as
had
well.
gone on 13 missions, and the 13th he was shot down. So there was that whole thing. He really hadn't been in that long, and he had this happen, and it was just incredibly traumatic for him, and it carried throughout the rest of his life. And I think, I just connected with that with him, and tried to understand, how can I help this situation for him and honor the memory of his brother.
Well, coming from a generation where therapy really hadn't existed, I'm sure you did him a great service.
I hope so. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say, I was so heroic with him. I feel like, I think it helped him move forward. I think the fact that he knew that, because I promised him I'll go visit my Uncle Donald at San Bruno and do that consistently.
So he was brought back to Golden Gate.
Yes. Okay. So, and there's a whole story about that too. He was able to, the one surviving crew member from my uncle's plane that was shot down, or that crashed. One survivor was able to say where he was buried and bring him back home.
Really?
And I talked to that guy. So I actually
was he a B-29?
B-25. Yeah. B-25. So he was in Utah at the time that I was in high school, and I called him on the phone. I just found him doing some internet research. I found this guy in Utah, and he talked to me about my uncle too. So he was the last one to see him alive. So it was really interesting to talk to him about that whole story and get the facts from the man who was there.
Well, now, what went into the decision? Obviously, you're talking to your uncle, and you're doing the project, and you're getting all these facts. Why not just write a narrative as opposed
for the book?
Yeah.
Well, after high school, and as I was saying before, when I was on the commission, I knew enough about my uncle and his struggles to know that we're in two very serious wars at the time, that we have people coming home to our community. They're probably having the same problem.
Sure.
So when I got the opportunity on the commission to develop my own team, I did so thinking, what are we doing right in the community? What are we doing wrong? What needs improvement? So I was able to meet a lot of vets that were having the same struggles. I went to Elmwood. I went to visit vets on every side of the spectrum. Okay. Those who are justice involved, those who are doing really well, what's going on and what resources are working for you. So in meeting those people, I realized, there's a lot more stories about war that I would like to incorporate in a book. So
the poetic license was adding.
Yes, it was adding because I thought, this is great. People will connect with this story, of course. It's on its own. It's great. But there's also things that I could incorporate that people could connect with, and that's what the beauty of it. I know the bare bones of the story, but when I have people come to me and they tell me, I loved this scene, that was something I added. So I thought, wow, I'm so glad I did, because this person, that connected with their service. So it helps them in a way. So if I had just stuck with the bare facts, that wouldn't have been in there.
Did you video your uncle?
Yeah, so that was the documentary portion of this whole thing.
And is that available on YouTube or anything?
Yeah, it's on, I believe it's storiesofservice.org, and I'll be adding it back to my website. So we did that in 2006. So I was able to really be involved in that. And one of my uncles is actually in it. The surviving uncle actually appeared in the documentary. So it's really special to have that raw footage in there as well.
We're going to take a little break. I want to talk more about specifically what you're doing with the veterans now.
Great.
And reaching out to help them. You're watching Talk of the Town. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hi, this is Spencer Day, and you're watching KCAT TV.
And we're back to Talk of the Town. We're chatting with Kelly Estes, author, entrepreneur, advocate. Your card is much too large, by the way. You have so much going on.
I know.
We were talking about the fact that you really had the remarkable good fortune, as you were talking about the guy in Utah, who was the only survivor on your uncle's plane.
My uncle's crew for the Doolittle
Now, was
raid.
he, when he crashed on the mainland of Japan?
In China, actually.
So after the raid?
After the raid. So they completed the raid, but they had to leave so much earlier than they expected. They ran out of fuel. So on their way back, the planes ran out of fuel and crashed. So my uncle, when they crashed, he was killed on impact. And there was a few survivors. So they helped bury him and another airman on the beach.
Okay.
So they were there for years. And out of that crew that actually survived the crash and then ended up in Japanese prison camp, only one survived, and that was the guy.
How many? Do you know offhand how many people are left from Doolittle's raid?
I think it's only a very small handful.
I don't think that long ago.
Yeah,
like 10
no,
or
they used to do reunions and stuff. But I think that since stopped, they cracked the bottle of cognac that they were saving, and it was really cool. But not too many left.
We talked about and I forgot his name just as when we talked about the first time, but the film that recently was done.
Unbroken.
Unbroken.
And I haven't seen that. I don't.
You haven't seen it. I know you don't go to movies.
I haven't seen a movie in years, so
But that book coming out and all the press and notoriety you got, did that help your book as well?
I don't know. I didn't really notice because I don't know if there was a correlation. I think war books in general are always pretty interesting to people, especially those who have served. So I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Did you have you ever talked to veterans from the other side? Like Japanese or German veterans? It'd be interesting to see.
It would be really interesting. I think that,
who takes the best care of their wounded warriors?
And I think that was something that my uncle said, now, it was something he touched on in the documentary was that, the enemy that he was fighting is now our friends. He had a really kind of head trip with that whole thing with that, they're at one point you're fighting with them and then the next minute they're supposed to be your friends. So it's like we're all humans, that was something that he always says is we're at the end of the day, everybody's just fighting for their own cause, but you might be good friends,
Was he treated particularly poorly by the Nazis?
I think they were more psychological than physical. From what I've heard from him, it was they would mess with him about his brother because the Germans actually knew that his brother had been killed.
Told
they
him.
knew, So he thought when they were telling him that, of course, you think they're messing with you to get information. So it wasn't until it was confirmed by another airman who had been on the raid himself that had happened that he believed it. So it was more like that.
You know, it's interesting that his generation, it was not manly, if you will, to ask for help.
No.
Now, while it's accepted, it's hard to get help.
Yeah, I think that was the hard thing. I think it wasn't, obviously, with the culture back then, it wasn't, you know, the best thing to ask for help in their mind. But I think it was also, there wasn't a lot known about it. You know, with shell shock, battle fatigue, it's gone by a lot of different names, but there wasn't a lot of research. But now that there is, I think people are more aware and they're asking for help. And now the system, I don't think, can handle all of that. Yeah.
Well, and your uncle had the double dose of trauma with being in combat and also being in a prison camp, and then the feelings, I'm assuming, of, well, I'm here, I'm not helping.
Right. And then just the loss, you know, dealing with the trauma.
And then dealing with, on top of that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel that. It's like, you know, they see a lot of things when they're fighting, and then there's always, you know, it comes back to their buddy getting killed or something happening to someone they really cared about, and that sparks a whole other kind of trauma. So,
what's the most glaring thing that could be done that we're not doing to help vets?
I think it's what you said. You know, it's like you're kind of trained to fight, and then there's really, you know, it's tougher. It's not that it's not available all the time, but it's just tougher to get access to what can help you sort of untangle from what you've experienced in a war. And I think that's why, you know, nonprofits, like we talked about when I was on your show a few weeks back, you know, we were talking about how grassroots organizations like nonprofits
have to exist
because you have more closer access to the local vet community, and you're able to get help in a more expedient fashion than I think sometimes the red tape will allow if you were to approach it bureaucratically. So,
well, and there's been a lot of talk about it, you know, about the Gulf War and the Afghanistan, is the amount of the survival rate.
Right.
Which, and you know, I mean, to coin a phrase, living doesn't always beat the option. And in World War II, you know, there weren't the MASH theaters and the mobile medical, and the survival rate was, I mean, dramatically. I mean, head wounds, I mean, it's tripled the survival rate now.
Yeah, because a lot of our medical science and research has come out of these wars, and you learn a lot, but unfortunately the previous wars, there wasn't a lot of technology to save people, but now grave wounds that used to be, you know, you were done, you could survive that, and that's what you're saying.
And we're keeping more people alive, but sadly, the quality of their lives, we're not keeping up with that.
Right, and it's a huge challenge that I think, you know, our generation is going to have to address, and that's why, you know, you can't help everybody when you're in a nonprofit situation like I'm in. You know, I want to help everyone, of course, but you're limited, so you have to know your scope, know who you're trying to help, and do the best that you can to get the assistance that person needs in the quickest fashion.
But isn't it amazing? I mean, there couldn't be a more politically correct cause, yet the politics of it are insane.
I know. It's crazy. It's like anything else, you know, everybody's got their cause, and for people like me, or, you know, or advocates, like, as you
and
said,
now we're to the point, I donate to Wounded Warriors, but I can't do this, or I can't, I mean, it's crazy. Yeah.
It's nuts, and you can only do so much, and I think the fact that there's a conversation that's a start, and then what can we do going forward, because it's not going to be something you fix overnight. It's going to have to be generations from now will be dealing with this. As you see, there's a lot of Vietnam veterans who still struggle. There's Korea vets. There's people from different generations of war. They're still struggling. So we're going to have to focus on this, I think, as a generation.
You write the book, and obviously you've taken away from the experience yourself a lot, and not the least of which is uniting and getting to talk to your uncle. What surprised you since the book's come out that you've learned?
since the book's come out.
Yeah,
So
I mean, the reaction to the book. I mean, do you find yourself going, yeah, I was just telling a little story? And
yeah, I mean, I think the thing was, I didn't serve, so I thought I was gonna, get all this backlash, but I served in a different capacity.
Sure.
I wouldn't say, I just didn't serve in the military, but I think just the embrace from vets that have read the book that say, wow, you weren't there obviously in World War II or any, other time, but you nailed it, so I
Right.
think that's the highest compliment, and that it made them think about their own struggles that they've been having that they couldn't articulate. So they say, what he was going through in this book, in this scene, I have experienced that. So they say, it really gave them the courage to go get help, because they didn't even realize that they needed any kind of assistance, or it was a problem, or they just didn't know how to ask. So I think the book has done that for a lot of people that have written to me, that have talked to me. It's really, really special, and that was hugely surprising.
I would think that it's also hit a very strong note with families.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. That's what's great, is we didn't do too much of the home front stuff in here. I try to keep it. I didn't want to turn into a love story fest. I wanted it to be real. So I think families are looking at it like, I had no idea this was something that they would go through. And then even the scenes at the end when he does come home, it's a total connection for a lot of people. So it's been really, really interesting.
The book's called The Cost of Courage. It's a marvelous book. Two brothers in the aerial theaters of World War II and the psychological aftermath of years of captivity. Captivity in prison on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
Folks want to find out more. How do they get the book?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
It's like everywhere you can go. It's hard copy, audio, ebook.
Kelly will come to your house.
I will come to your house.
She's out front.
No,
that car
I
you see
can't.
running.
I can't do that for everyone. I'm sorry. No, but I try to sign it. I have book signings. If you go on the website for the nonprofit, because a portion of all the sales is donated, and that's sort of what got me.
And what is the nonprofit?
So the Cost of Courage Foundation.
Okay.
I started a scholarship fund in my uncle's name.
Okay.
So the uncle who was killed in action, it's the Sergeant Donald Fitzmaurice Memorial Scholarship, and it's going to be awarded in November. So any vets can apply. We're really approaching colleges around here that have vet programs to get the word out, and we're donating school supplies, and there's been a lot of other opportunities as well.
So what else are you doing these days? Now that is there consideration of another? I mean, was this a one-time thing, or did you get the bug that I kind of like to?
I had my downtime,
You had your downtime. You had a couple of weeks off.
Yeah, and I had a few weeks, but I think I just had such a history with this one, and it just bothered me for so many years since I was in high school. So I felt like I just had this gnawing thing, like I had to write this story, and something just kept pushing me to do it. So I feel like if I got that spark again, I would definitely write, and I feel like everybody's got these
the cost
stories.
of courage is not summed up in one book, and
I know,
the stories that you're
prequel,
hearing.
Sequel, yeah.
Well, it's not really a sequel; it's as much as just a commentary on what continues to happen.
Yeah, because it'll break your heart.
Yeah.
The stories that you hear, like I just the stories I've heard going to visit vets in the county, over 5 years of stories, and but that's why I felt like I incorporated a lot in here. But there's always that story. It's like, I just want to tell this person. I want this person to be remembered, and that's what actually led me to do the Vet of the Month on our site. So it's free. Yeah. Anybody can apply.
And the site is?
So the costofcouragefoundation.org.
Okay.
They can go on there and nominate themselves, nominate another vet who would be a perfect candidate for being recognized for their story. So I feel like it's a rotating basis of highlighting somebody for their service every month. So, but I would love to write again if I ever have downtime. We'll see what happens.
Well, what are you doing now that takes up all the downtime?
I think that nonprofit is keeping me.
It's a full time.
It's because I have a job, but it's keeping every other minute. We actually had a laser eye surgeon. He donated $30,000 of free LASIK.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That was amazing. So we've got a lot of vets taking advantage of that.
It's interesting. I worked with the folks that are trying to do the cemetery in Monterey.
Oh,
because national cemeteries, I don't know if you knew this, cannot be, and it wouldn't be, because you can't be within 100 miles of each other. And since
I didn't know
Golden
that
Gate,
rule.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
think the
since
next
Golden
one's
Gate's
in
in
Los
San Bruno,
Banos, is in
so-
Los Banos or something.
Oh, yeah.
And San Bruno,
so-
my dad's there, and San Bruno's filled.
It
So
is.
you can't get in there, so these people are having to go to Los Banos to visit their relatives. So they're trying to do one at Fort Ord. And
That would
so,
make sense, though.
But again, it couldn't be national because of it's, as a crow
Yeah.
flies, it's 100
I
miles.
had no idea
Yeah,
that
yeah.
San Bruno had all these different sections because this
You
one
ever
guy.
walk the cemetery?
Oh yeah, I
It's
go there all the
amazing, yeah.
time to bring flowers and stuff. But this guy that works the grounds there, he said, "Your uncle is buried in a very prestigious section."
Really?
I said, "I had no idea. It's the Admiral Nimitz section." So you
Okay.
wouldn't know. I think it's just something internally
Oh, it's
they
fascinating.
know.
I mean, it's
but-
not to sound ghoulish, but take a tour. I don't know if they have
Yeah,
organized tours.
I don't think they do. I don't think they have a
but
tour
if you
guide.
go up,
but
it's like going to Arlington. I mean,
Yeah,
just to
yeah.
wander around,
yeah.
it's remarkable.
It's amazing and it's sad at the same time.
Yeah.
That was the first time I ever went there. I was like 15 or something, and I couldn't believe just the rows of it just headstones, and it was so
Well,
sad.
yeah. I will
And-
try to say this without getting verklempt, but if you go there and find a headstone from your birth year, see someone that, there but for fortune.
Yeah.
It was a remarkable experience. I remember the first time I was there.
That you saw that.
Somebody was there that was born the same year I was.
It's so heartbreaking.
And now, as young as you are, there are names now. That
There
will
are,
be
and that's
from
what's
that. And
sad.
later.
It's like there's 1990, and they didn't get to live, and this is why, my uncle. This is what broke my heart about his story was he was only 23. So I think when I turned 23, that was huge for me because I thought, even if I live a day over this, or I think he only was like 23 in a month, I think, and I thought when I finally hit, like I was older than him when he died, that was huge, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And
Right.
at that time, I decided I want to do this nonprofit. I want to honor his name because he was valedictorian of his class.
Okay.
He didn't get to go to school. He wanted to go to college when he got back, but he didn't get a chance to. So if I can carry on his name with a student that is like going to school, they really want to do good with themselves, that's going to honor his memory for life.
Is
So-
your other uncle in the National Cemetery?
Yeah, so they're buried together.
Oh, they're buried together.
that-
So he got
yeah,
in.
He got in, yeah. So that was his
Under
dream.
the deadline,
and,
which is
yeah.
terrible.
No, I think that was huge for him because they were so close, and I think that, I'm honoring both of them by honoring, my Uncle Donald, who he didn't get to have a life. He didn't get to go to school, have kids, do anything. So I feel like I live every day, I want to do something good for him and do something good for me. And I never met him, so it's just kind of, it's interesting.
Does it ever stop amazing you how much a little contact means to a vet?
You mean like
Just to go out and to chat?
What I love, one of my favorite things to do, I'll bake cupcakes. I know it's so juvenile, but I mean, I'll bake cupcakes. I know that I can, I'm giving the scholarship and all this help where I can that's actually big. But I think the best thing is just baking some cupcakes, going to the homeless vets housing facility down the street from my house, and just bringing the cupcakes, and they're so happy you're just talking to them and you get to know them, so it's more personal. And you talk to them about their service and you get to connect with them individually. And I'll never get tired of that. That's one of my favorite things to do. So I love that I can just go on a Sunday and
Now,
hang out.
I know folks as they see this will be going, what a nice thing. I would like to do that. Is there a website somewhere? I mean, visitavet.com?
I don't know.
I don't know if it is.
I don't know who has that domain
Where it would
name.
direct you? Where it would direct you and what you'd like to do?
I'm pretty sure that the VA's got some visiting hour. It's constantly changing, so you should call ahead probably. But I think there's ways to do that there, but also just donating to nonprofits that we have access to the vets and can take it to them. We can take stuff to them. Volunteering. We are going to do care packaging, school supply stuff, so they could always come hang out with us. At the Cost of Courage Foundation. You're always welcome. And there's just a lot of smaller organizations around here. And if you research enough, it's not that hard to find. So,
The Cost of Courage, the book, the foundation, and the wonderful woman who's put it together.
thank you.
sweetie.
Thank
Delight
you
to
so
see
much
you.
for having me.
Kelly Estes. That's Talk of the Town. Look forward to seeing you soon. Until next time, I'm Jacobi.